Alright, so last time we did the tie-up to all of my City Watch guys, and I said that I was going to take a break from showing maps and other custom stuff for the time being until I get it more fleshed out the way I want it. So in the meantime, I thought I'd actually go back to some of my older stuff, meaning specifically like older characters and character concepts and world and stuff like that. So I decided to choose probably my favorite D&D character I ever created of all time. Not my first. My first was a half-orc, lawful neutral monk who his name was FAUGH, and he's got a really good story too. Maybe I'll tell that one sometime later. But the guy I'm going to tell you about now took a lot of thinking in order to get things right. And it took a lot of consideration for his background and what I really wanted to make him. I posted all of this stuff. I'm going to show you my tablet here. I don't know if you guys can see it. We actually have a group on Facebook called SORPA, S-O-R-P-A, Southern Ontario Role-Playing Association. And we have quite a few members, and I'm usually the one posting in the room. It's like 4 multiple choice questions called Book of Useless Information. I also post Hey Get This, which is the character stuff that I post that either comes out of my head or was on my notes. I also post Look What I Can Generate, and it's usually stuff from FAUGH and his generators, or other stuff from other sites like Don John and Red Dragon and stuff like that. So the original posting I did for this character was on SORPA, and it came in 2 different parts. It's how long the story was. Now, granted, it's not a book worth, but it does come in 2 different parts, which I'm going to share with you guys now. And what he is unique. So, if you're playing upon the idea that all D&D needs to be extremely strict right down to the letter, meaning you could never customize anything, never make anything your own. I'm not saying homebrew, I just mean like thinking outside of the box and subsequently way outside the box. If you're one of those kind of players that are strict by the books, you're going to have a hard time accepting this. For other people who have a broader spectrum of fantasy role-playing, this should actually interest you. His name is FAUGH, F-A-U-G-H. Born of the bastardization of an orc warlord and a human prisoner, and never knowing which parent was which, named for the weather that haunted his birth, though the pronunciation went hand in hand with the misspelling or the spelling mishap, FAUGH was kept under full protest of his orcish parents up until the 2nd year of his life, when the constant ridicule and cruel treatment became too much. His orc parent was killed, and FAUGH was thrown to the wilds. But fate wasn't going to let this one die. Oh no, not this day. Picked up by the traveling caravan guards, the whelp had a bit of luck. They weren't going to sell him into slavery, nor was he to be a sideshow attraction. No, these were goodly folk, and they instead took him into the nearest temple they could find on their journey. Sure, he was a half-orc, and he was also a child and scared out of his toddler mind. And luck, again, winked in his direction, for the temple he was taken to was one of the Arch-Paladin, the Invincible, the valorous knight, the one and only Hieronymus. Life wasn't going to be scary anymore. The darkness that had flooded his reality was cast out, and a life-giving strength filled his soul. Now was the time to learn from his tan-skinned, kind-hearted, non-porcine elders. That's right. A paladin of Hieronymus. And FAUGH's natural strength made him a natural, even if it was a bit gruff whenever it came to sociable skills. But he refused to give up on any of the aspects of the extremely rigid teachings of the path of the paladin. But in order to fulfill his debt, he had to leave and bring darkness to the light, as he had been. So he set out when he was old enough and strong enough. But to prove what his worth was, and he was worthy enough, FAUGH chose the extremes of quests. reconnoiter and purify the Underdark denizens. But in order to do so, he had to accept the spellcasting loss that he had been granted in exchange for methods of training as an Underdark knight. So, he ventured forth without fear into the unknown hells beneath the surface world. But this story's not over. Another chapter writes itself, even now. What all that means is, whenever I created FAUGH, I got rid of all of his spellcasting abilities as per one of the Paladin variants. Whenever I did that, I had to delve into the complete champion. I had to look for something really unique for FAUGH, since there are, bloodlines of orcs that do live in the Underdark, which, of course, is the massive collective underworld of FAUGH, of the Forgotten Realms, that houses everything from the first on the list would be, of course, the Drow, the black-skinned, white-haired, red-eyed evil elves, to the Mind Flayers, the Illithids, to Minotaurs, to all kinds of crazy things. But it also holds Orogs, which I come to find out with a little bit of research were actually Underdark orcs. I didn't write that into being one of his parents, but I thought that the lineage would still be orc-blooded. So, he being, having a negative 2 to intelligence, FAUGH chose the hardest of the hard ways, so that he could repay his debt to the church, to Hieronymus, to what gave him life. So, he's outfitted with a special kind of weapon. It's not anything like illegal or homebrewed or anything like that, but it is from, and I've got a box set down there, and that's pretty much all I have. It is from Dark Sun. It's a weapon called a tricle. If you know D&D, you know what a sickle is, right? The handheld, single-curved, usually meant as a farm implement for reaping, like, grains and crops. Well, imagine if there was 3 of them with the blades all facing out in a specific direction so that it kind of has a 3-point pyramid look. And it does hurt whenever it hits. I mean, it does a D10, which is incredible for a handheld weapon. But it's more like akin to how hard-hitting a heavy mace is, But a tricle specifically is meant for tripping. I chose that because FAUGH's feat progressions... See, I chose combat expertise, weapon focus, tricle, extra smiting, improved smiting, power attack, improved trip, and improved unarmed strike. See, I chose some rather non-lethal attacks. Except, of course, if you were evil or, in the way of a paladin's duties. But for the most part, he's got some non-lethal capabilities, and he's really, really good at it, too. He named his weapon Junrage, and it is a rather largely powerful weapon, due to the fact that I not only made him a paladin, I made him a Kensai. Out of the complete warrior, it's sort of like what a samurai is in Rokugan or Oriental Adventures, but there is a Greyhawk samurai, which has nothing to do with the other, completely different. A Kensai actually bonds himself to his word of honor and to his weapon. It becomes magically, innately powerful by itself. And up until the point where eventually you won't need anything else but this weapon. That's why I went ahead and married him to the idea of having it. He also has a heavy steel shield, and he's in full plate. With the tricle, with the shield, and with his full plate, he's a tank. But that's not a bad thing, okay? He went into the Underdark, and he did quite a lot of changing. Whenever you become an Underdark Knight, you gain dark vision, or if you had dark vision like a half-orc does, it expands even further. He's got like 120 feet worth of dark vision. That's usually what regular denizens of the Underdark have, is 120 feet, or at least, at very least, like 90 feet. And he lost all of his spellcasting ability. He can cast no divine spells, but he does have his normal paladin abilities. The reason he was able to keep those was because Kensai is one of the very, very few prestige classes a paladin can go to and still be able to be a paladin. In the Underdark, however, he made it his mission to start hitting evil denizen caravans. Drow, Svirfnebli, Durgar, Minotaurs, Orogs, things like that were either shipping things to the surface world that they shouldn't have been, or he was also hitting raiding camps and stuff like that, because he was able to basically become the guerrilla warfare agent in the Underdark where there's no light. Later in his existence, he went through another change. The second part to his story is this. The Underdark spells death for anyone, or anything, caught amongst its endless labyrinths of tunnels and caves. Everything from aboleths to zombies await foolish adventurers or slack-jawed native caravans. But FAUGH was without fear or foolishness. He was an Underdark knight, and quested into the unknown to bring Heronis' light to the dark. FAUGH spent the better part of 5 years hitting drow caravans and Durgar smugglers and Minotaur bands and all of the Underdark denizens, until he happened upon a caravan ripe for a one-man guerrilla tactic. He watched in silence, seeing what the caravan was carrying, when a roper, which is a plant-based thing that belongs in the Underdark, befell the unwitting caravan. Once the killer Underdark tree was vanquished, FAUGH leapt into action and brought Heronis' vengeance upon the evil drow. Giving them a choice, a few chose to end their lives against FAUGH's righteous blade, a few scattered, but one, the guard left from the roper's voracious appetite, he produced a wicked weapon FAUGH had never seen. 3 sickles, welded together, blades out in a kind of a tri-tip hook. And hook it did, tripping FAUGH over and over during battle. FAUGH's long sword got sundered, and he got kicked into the carriage, breaking the side panel and exposing what was inside. A vicious hooked weapon bared down on him again, the guard going in for the kill, but it missed, hair's breadth away from FAUGH's skull, and lodged into the broken caravan panel in the carriage. With all of his righteous might, a steel gauntleted smiting haymaker ended up shattering the guard's spine and ending the foray, hence the improved unarmed strike. He can fight with no weapons if need be. Spent and deeply wounded, FAUGH unwedged the tricle and looked down at his destroyed longsword fragments in the back of the tricle. He named it Junrage and took it for his own. Summoning the last bit of his strength, he used Junrage to pry open the carriage, only to find an egg. Grand in size compared to a chicken's egg, whenever FAUGH had no other choice but to compare it to that. But this egg was scaled, dark, almost impossible to see even with the Underdark Knights in Hands of Vision. It was cool to the touch, like it had cast its shadows on the warmth of a day, but it was warmed whenever it felt FAUGH's gloved palm. It was alive, and while FAUGH was no student of the Lyceum, this was a living thing that had not even had the chance to breathe its first breath of life. FAUGH's compassion overwhelmed him, so he took the egg and leapt to a relatively quote-unquote safe corner of the Underdark he'd been using as a fallback spot after raids. There, in the darkness, for a couple of 100 days, he tended the egg, speaking to it, telling it tales, singing to it, albeit off-key. Then, one day, a year later or so, it hatched. And out climbed a draconic creature of the Underdark that normally would have attacked the first meal that it saw. But FAUGH was no meal, and in the imprint that occurred between the two was one of epicness. Aether Sajak. It's all one word, it's a big mouthful. Draconic for celestial shadow, or Aether for short. Became a son to FAUGH, just as those who the temple priests and paladins that had become fatherly coterie for him. Aether had a chance to be something other than a murderous, deceiving shadow dragon, due fully to FAUGH's teachings. He never could break Aether of his chaotic tendencies, but evil he was not, and never would he be. Eventually the two left the Underdark, and ventured back into Faerun to continue the questing that drove FAUGH. But that shall be another tale. Yeah, he found a shadow dragon egg, and he took it. And when he raised it, the shadow dragon then became a redeemed villain. right out of the Book of Exalted Deeds. I could quote you the page number if I wasn't using it to prop up my camera. So, a half-orc, lawful good paladin of Heronius with a full-blooded shadow dragon that had been raised to be good rather than evil. That is one of the best pairings I've ever done, and funny enough, my good friend Chuck, an old gamer friend of mine, he actually plays Aether and has his sheet. And those games are some of the best ones that I remember from whenever we were actually gaming constantly some years ago. It makes for an even better tale, which I'll share next time. And I won't need a prompt because I still have it in my head. I'll share next time what FAUGH and Aether actually do now that they've gone back to the surface. But for now, video's gone long. I'll talk about their story next time. But until then, grab your dice. Roll initiative.